Veritas Aquitus by Bonesboy15, Chapter 8, Roman's Fangs. A few days had passed since Blake had gone missing. The first day, no progress was made in finding her because Ruby, Yang, and Weiss were still shocked at the revelation of their teammate being a secret Faunus and ex-White Fang member. And the second day, as due to the lack of progress made on the first, Team Juniper offered to help with the search, but Weiss had refused them before Ruby could accept, and when Naruto, Sasuke, Kurama, or Haku tried to offer their help, they were met with possibly the coldest shoulder ever. The Schnee Harris had all but ignored Team Knox since they had known Blake's secret, but had not told any of them. She felt it was a betrayal of sorts, even when Haku pointed out that the secret was Blake's to tell and not theirs. Weiss stubbornly refused to accept that as an answer and had all but began to pretend that the all-male team had even existed. Her guard was high after Blake's secret of once being a member of the White Fang. It seemed that she hadn't taken the violation of her trust very well, which was something that Sasuke said he could understand. The other two members of Team Ruby hadn't spoken with the all-male team much either, save for at the lunch hall. Ruby's excuse was a bit understandable, since the youngest huntress in training was more concerned with locating her wayward teammate. She had apologized for it, and Naruto took it for what it was. He understood what the problem was for Ruby. Her pride and confidence as a leader had taken a hard blow. Not only had she a good 2 years not only was she a good 2 years behind everyone in her class intellectually, but she was also lacking 2 years of experience and emotional maturity. Yang was also a bit miffed at the boys for the secret, but she was being distant for some other reason. When asked by Sasuke, Kurama, or Haku, Yang refused to give a straight answer. When Naruto asked, she would remain silent and ignore him. However, when they were in the same room, Naruto felt an angry gaze fall upon him. Seeing as he couldn't get an answer through Yang directly or through his teammates' attempts, Naruto just gave up on it and settled with taking the odd angry looks his fellow blonde sent his way. There must be something we can do to help them, Haku said thoughtfully from where he was perched on the edge of a tall building. He and the rest of Team Nox watched the three girls wander through Vale looking for the now known Cat Faunus. Team Nox had been following the three girls from a distance under Naruto's orders. The whiskered blonde had a secretive smile when asked why, and merely replied that he was bored. Besides, Weiss didn't want help, so pushing on the issue wouldn't be wise at all. I can sense her, so I know she's alive, but this is a problem for Team Ruby to address. Kurama sat cross-legged at Haku's left, his cheek propped up by a bored fist. His Faunus adjusted his grip on Rikodo's monk staff form. The Snee would rip our hearts off if we tried to go help without permission. Others cannot fix a broken team, Sasuke mused from where he stood next to the red-teamed Faunus. His arms were crossed around his chest, and his eyes stared down at the three girls. It is something that must be done by the team itself. The most we can do is guide them down the right path. Haku sighed at the profound answer. Sometimes I wish I had gone to Khan Academy. The team preparation there must have been amazing. He looked to his left in surprise when the lounging form of his team leader burst into laughter. A chuckle escaped Sasuke, and Kurama concealed his laughter as best he could while his shoulders shook. Looking between his three teammates, Haku blinked. Am I mistaken? He asked. Yeah, you had to be there. Sasuke smiled lightly as their amusement dwindled away. If anything, it was Kakashi who taught us the right way to work as a team. Best teacher ever. Naruto grinned up at the sky and Kurama nodded. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. The three Khan native grinned as they recited one of their teacher's most well-known and recited quotes. By that logic, wouldn't that make Blake worse than trash? Haku asked. It was a beautiful line, really it was, but the philosophy didn't seem to fit the scenario. She has not abandoned her team, Kurama explained as he sat up lightly. She's afraid, and most Faunus react to fear instinctually. Prejudice among her friends isn't a foe she can fight, so she fell upon her fear. She ran, and being the good friends they are, Ruby Yang and I can't believe I'm saying this, even Weiss is chasing her. They're acting the same way we would if you decided to jump up and disappear on us, Sasuke said with a small smirk to Haku. You can thank Kakashi for that if you meet him. Like I said, Kakashi's the best teacher ever, Naruto reiterated. I thought that was the Toad Sage, Haku asked. Naruto shook his head with a small plaster on his with a small smile plastered on his face. No, he's my godfather. He just happened to trade me on the side. In what? Haku asked. The whiskered blonde smile dwindled slightly. Stuff. You three are the most secretive friends I've ever met, Haku said with a sigh, while Kurama and Sasuke smirked at his response. He had little to go by on their history, and it felt like he was still putting the puzzle together, one misshapen piece at a time. When Haku thought he had the whole picture, they went and threw a new piece into the mix. Not like you've been that open with your past, Sasuke said knowingly. Haku's shoulders fell. My past is where I would like to keep it. In the past, he muttered. Haku looked up when Naruto's hand fell on his shoulder, and the whiskered teen smiled at him. And we respect your decision. There will be a time when you wish to tell us, and we will be more than willing to listen. Naruto reaffirmed his words with a comforting pat, and Haku smiled at his partner. You're a good friend, Naruto. Naruto beamed at the compliment, but it fell into a pout when Haku sighed. It's a shame you're an idiot. Oi! Naruto pulled his hand away and glared at his partner. Indeed it is, Kurama said. He gave a sad sigh of his own despite the giant grin on his face. In the field, he's either battle crazy or tactically unstoppable, but to take him out of the field and his brain power drains to zero, leaving him stupid. Naruto's eyes twitched. I'm not stupid. Even Coco can stop that from happening. Sasuke gave a wistful sigh and placed his hand on his cheek. Try as she might, poor boy will never get himself a girlfriend at this rate. I've had a girlfriend, damn it. It's so sad. I'll talk and no walk. Kurama shook his head. Naruto glared at his teammates. You're ignoring me on purpose. Haku looked at Sasuke with a small smile. If only I had been partnered with you, Sasuke, then I would not be forced to listen to him prattle on about various flavors of ramen. We feel your pain. Kurama sympathized with a pat on the shoulder. Sasuke shook his head. It's got to be all that salt that makes him so stupid. Oi, that tears it. Unblessed ramen is not to be insulted in my presence. Naruto started to storm away while the three laughed. The blonde grumbled furiously under his breath as he jumped down into a nearby alleyway. Kurama wiped a small tear from underneath his sunglasses once their team leader was gone. Ah, that was fun. He sighed happily. So, since the glutton isn't here, guess anyone want to go get a bowl? My treat? I'm in, Sasuke said. He rubbed his stomach. We've been following the girls since breakfast. I'm starved. I suppose a bowl wouldn't hurt. Haku shrugged. The three left the remnants of Ruby to their research as they sought out their lunch. Okay, so, while we agreed to go look at the place where the White Fang aren't supposed to be to prove they're doing right, they aren't supposed to do in a different place. They're not supposed to, my head hurts. The son groaned after he finished that mouthful. He held his stomach. Or that's just the tea I drank earlier, settling. Anyway, I know we're supposed to be like super sexy phonics duo, but we're not a super sexy phonics duo. They cut in calmly as they walked through the city towards the warehouse district. She had poured her heart out to Sun after he had stalked her for a day and a half, even after he'd learned about her past and involvement with the crazy faunus. He'd agreed to help her try to clear their name. Frankly, she thought he was a sweet guy, a bit eccentric, but concerning who her teammates and friends were, she could accept it. And he had nice abs, but that was just a bonus, really. Sun pouted at her before he sighed. Right, okay, he conceded. Anyway, I may have a sort of told Naruto what we were planning. Blake stopped walking and glared at the blonde faunus. You, what? I told Naruto our plan. Sun rubbed the back of his neck. Blake glared at him even harder and he held his hands up in defense. Now hear me out. The little dude knows you were with me the whole time. He's got this brain thing that rears its ugly head even now and again. Plus, he's a beast on a battlefield if his messages to me about his siblings are right. Blake had to concede to that point. Naruto did manage to hold off that massive Grimble on his own during their initiation, and had been undefeated in every mock fight that he participated in among the first-year Beacon students. That alone had to mean something. Then there was his stance on the White Fang, which fell alongside with Blake's own. Naruto didn't hold White Fang in contempt like Weiss did, though looking back on it, Weiss's anger was understandable. He thought they needed to be redirected, even if it meant using force. Not to mention he's a great dude, and I've been dying to hang out with him, Sun added. He grinned widely and held his arms out. What better way to bond with a bro than by investigating a warehouse district? Fine, Blake agreed after moments of thought. Naruto was Sun's friend long before either had met Blake, and they'd barely managed to hang out or talk since they met on the docks. It was only natural that Sun would want to meet up with his pen pal over hanging over with her. Blake ignored the mild discomfort in her stomach as the logical reasoning went through her head. Really awesome! Sun cheered with his fist in the air. He grinned at his fellow faunist. Trust me, Blake, this'll be a good thing. I sure hope so. Blake mumbled, and she turned to continue walking and jumped when Naruto suddenly popped up in front of her. Yo! The whiskered blonde greeted the two faunus with a two-fingered salute. Blake looked at him, then at an equally surprised but intrigued Sun, and then back at him with a frown. How did you sneak up on us like that? She asked. Naruto fell into an exaggerated martial arts stance. I am a ninja. Fear my ninja-tude, the whiskered blonde declared, a mad grin on his face. I'm going to regret agreeing to this, Blake mumbled as she walked past the blonde human. Sun snickered while Naruto pouted. The monkey-tailed faunus looked at his fellow blonde with an arched brow and an amused smile. Ninja Dude, you're just jealous you didn't come up with it first, Naruto argued with a huff as he followed after Blake. Only a little, Sun said with a chuckle. He let his hands rest behind his head, and his tail swished happily as he followed the two Beacon students. One was his longtime pen pal, and the other was a cute Phonics girl. Life was good for Sun Wukong. Um, I'm so bored. I should have gone with Sun to get some food, Naruto groaned as he hung by the back of his knees from the neck of a crane while Sun and Blake staked out the shipyard from atop a nearby warehouse. They'd been at the shipyard for nearly 6 hours now, and aside from the usual boring, to Naruto and Sun anyway, things that occurred on site, nothing much including criminal acts had happened. Heck, Naruto had even enough time to scale his 80-foot tall shipping crane after Sun had scampered off to get some food. Naruto perked up at the sound of a bulkhead engine and looked to his left. Sure enough, there was a bulkhead with the symbol of the white fang on the cargo doors. Naruto swung up to the stand on the crane's neck and looked over apologizingly towards Blake and Sun. From what he could see, Blake was not pleased with this development, and Sun, well, he looked ready to jump down and put a stop to the operation. Five white fang grunts dressed in black and white armor with creatures of grim masks on their faces and underneath their helmets stepped out of the bulkhead after it landed. They looked around and searched for any threats, and just before Naruto was spotted by one, the edge of a cigar flew out from the bulkhead's doorway and hit the disguised faunus in the side of the head. Stop wasting time, you animals. We have a very strict schedule to keep. A man stepped out of the bullhead with orange hair combed over the right side of his face and a bowler cap on his head. He wore a white coat and dark pants, but it was the cane that really sealed the deal. That's that torchwick guy that's been all over the news, Naruto mused silently as his eyes narrowed. He blinked in surprise when Blake jumped down and rushed at the wanted fugitive. Naruto locked eyes with Sun, who shrugged at the questioning glance sent his way. The two blondes looked back up as more bulkheads flew into the area. Oh, this will be fun. Naruto grinned as he stood and faced the incoming forces. He clenched his hands into fists and slammed them together. The bulky forms of his gauntlets folded out over his hands, and Naruto grinned with his stormbreakers ready. Naruto brought his arms to his sides, and his skin gained a light golden glow as the semblance drew upon more aura. 5 times boost should be enough. Time to crack some skulls. Naruto ran across the neck of the crane at the nearest bulkhead when its gun still came down at Blake, who was in the process of fighting against Torchwick while Sun fought off the thieves' goons. Once he reached the end of the crane's neck, Naruto jumped and pulled his right fist back. His grin was wide as he threw his punch and drove his fist into the hull of the nearest bulkhead. His blow caved the metal in. A loud, ear-shattered squeal filled the air as the metal protested against his strike. Naruto's attack knocked the bulkhead into another, causing the two to collide and descend to the shipyard. Naruto landed on a container below and watched as the two bulkheads crashed to the shipyard's ground in a fiery explosion. Naruto giggled gleefully while he watched the fires burn. Explosions are so cool! Boom boom! He let his gauntlets fold away with a grin on his face. Get him! Naruto looked over his shoulder at the cry. Several white fang grunts aimed their automatic weapons at him. Each nameless opponent had the same determined scowl on their face. Naruto held his hands up to shield his face when they started to open fire. The bullets tore through his clothes like a knife through butter, but bounced off of his skin like it was a wall. He would have laughed if it wasn't so annoying to be pelted over and over by the small ammunition. It was like being attacked by a swarm of mosquitoes. By the time the grunts had run out of rounds in their clips, Naruto's jacket was ruined. The armor was either fractured beyond repair or chock full of bullets, and the cloth was torn beyond the abilities of any tailor. He was pretty much wearing orange and black rags from the waist up. The bullets themselves looked like they had been fired at a wall of adamantium, caved inwards to the point that they looked like they were crafted incorrectly and were piled around his feet nearly to his ankles. You guys are so lucky that I have 4 more of these jackets. Naruto glowered at the 4 awestruck White Fang grunts. He dropped down from his place atop the container and landed in front of the grunts, a perturbed look on his face. He reached up and removed his necklace, carefully bundling it up before he placed the rings in a special slot on the heel of his boot. With his parents' rings safe from danger, Naruto then stood up and cracked his knuckles. "So," he said, as his eyes looked over his 4 opponents, "who wants to take the next shot?" The 4 exchanged looks before the one on the far left, further from Naruto, lifted his gun. A bullet left the barrel and nailed Naruto right in the forehead. Naruto's head tilted back slightly before he reached up and grabbed the bullet off of his forehead. Like the last attempts, his bullet was no longer of use to anyone. Naruto flickered it to the side and fixed his gaze on the one that shot at him. "Like that? Look at that," he said, a grin plastered on his face while he stared at the awestruck grunt. "We have a volunteer." Naruto quickly closed the distance between him and the White Fang grunt that had tried to shoot him in the head. He knocked the poor sod into the air with a single blow. The whiskered huntsman's hand lashed out and grabbed onto the grunt's ankle. He then turned and flung the widened faucet at one of his companions. This sent the 2 extremists into the side of the container the Naruto previously stood on, and they slumped down to the ground unconscious. The other 2 faunas exchanged a look with one another. They grabbed the underside of their guns and pulled back on the grip. Naruto arched a brow when the duo of extremists were now armed with 5 feet-long broadswords that had the symbol of the White Fang carved into the side. They let out yells as they charged at Naruto with their swords over their heads. Naruto caught their attacks on the descent, and he grinned when the 2 saw that the sharp edges of their blades did nothing to his palm's flesh. "In hindsight, you probably would have thought this through," Naruto said to the 2 White Fang members. He twisted his wrist and snapped the blades with ease. Naruto then grabbed a wrist of either faunus. He twisted under his arms so that they collided with each other, their hands still in his grip. He then leapt up and over the 2 awkwardly hugging faunus. When his feet touched the ground, his arms wiped the White Fang grunts at the rising grunts that either Sun or Blake had dealt with. The grunts collided with wet thuds and went limp. The thought of his fondest friends had Naruto turning around to locate them. Once he did, he watched them tag off with one another against Torchwick, doing an impressive job complimenting and coupling each other. He blinked when a black shade appeared in a place where Blake once was and took a blow that was meant for her. It was similar to Blake in build and appearance, but more inky, like a dark shadow. "Whoa, cool semblance." Naruto grinned when he saw that Torchwick visibly became frustrated at his inability to tell which black figure was the real one to strike. This forced the thief to remain on defense lest Blake's furious attack strategy go through. "Shadow clones. Wish I had that ability. So many pranks could be done." Naruto wistfully dreamt of the ability to make a clone of himself. Heck, they just make one. Heck, why just make one when he could have a dozen or 100, maybe even 1,000 or 2? Though these thoughts led to less than appropriate ones concerning the act's reproduction. Dopey grin quickly spread across Naruto's face. Elsewhere, a tall white-haired man got busted for peeping in a woman's locker room when he started to boisterously cry tears of joy. While he suffered the blows, empowered by the wrath of righteous feminine fury, he could only smile proudly. When he was finally kicked out of the gym, the man limped over to the nearest park bench, sat down, and grinned up at the sky. "I'm so proud of you, Naruto." Truly, only a lecherous dream could have made me feel such pride. The man giggled perversely and pulled out a notebook. He wrote in it eagerly as the pride he felt inspired a new scene. He would then be arrested for his public debauchery. The officers that arrested him were unnerved by his smile and his penchant for the occasional giggle. They were outright floored when the district attorney demanded he be released and all charges be dropped a few hours later. The district attorney would receive a limited edition of the Ninjas of Love in the mail 3 weeks later, signed by the author, the Toad Sage. Naruto shook his head to snap out of the pleasant daydream his godfather would applaud him for. And there was time for that sort of things later. There was a fight to be won now. He said clear. Naruto looked back at the fight between Torchwick, Blake, and Sun. The two Faunas had the master thief on the ropes, and it looked like Torchwick was aware of it. Torchwick backed away to create distance between him and the teens. His cane rose up and popped open. Naruto frowned and followed Torchwick's aims. His eyes went wide when he saw the shipping container that dangled above Blake and Sun's heads. One good shot was all it would take to snap the cable that kept the container suspended in the air, and it looked like Torchwick was counting on that to be the case. With this in mind, Naruto ran forward towards his friends when he realized the criminal's intention. As he neared his two Faunus allies, a few White Fang grunts rose in front of him. Naruto, thinking on the fly of how to quickly deal with these peons without losing his momentum, clapped his hands together at his side. He let his arms swing out and put the three White Fang grunts down for the night with a 3-in-1 clothesline. He used the momentum of his arm swinging to spin down, allowing him to slide on his knees to kneel between Blake and Sun. Dodge this freak, Torchwick growled as he fired a bright red blast from his cane to take out the cable. The two Faunas dove out of the way of the falling container while Naruto stayed put and rose to his feet. He brought his arms up and managed to catch the oversized metal box before it crushed him. The whiskered blonde grinned as the shocked criminal, whose awe was shared by Naruto's two friends. "Hey, Torchwick!" Naruto called while he slightly adjusted his grip on the container. "No way!" the thief gaped at the sight of the glowing teenager holding the massive amount of steel over his head with ease. He swore that this sort of thing only happened in movies or books. Huntsmen and huntresses, school kids especially, were not supposed to be this freaking weird. "I think you dropped something." Naruto reared his arms back and then tossed the shipping container with a yell. "Here!" "Shit!" Torchwick exclaimed as he dove out of the way. The container loudly crashed into the ground where Torchwick once stood and broke the cement beneath it on impact. Torchwick rolled out of his dive and used his cane to block a follow-up attack from one of the Sun's nunchuck. Whether it was a Ruyi Bang or a Jinyu Bang, Naruto wasn't sure. Torchwick tilted his head to avoid the following blast that came from Sun's weapon and knocked the monkey-like Faunus to the side with a hard swing of his cane. The thief got to his feet and reached into his pocket to pull out a small device. "You stupid, filthy bastard! Excuse of a house pet! Get your ass over here and help me. I have a few strays that need to be put down." Torchwick snarled into the communication device. He pocketed it and lifted his cane to catch both Blake's sword and bladed sheath when he tried to get a sneak attack on him. "Nice try, kitty cat, but you should have walked away when you had the chance." Torchwick smirked at the glowering girl. "Never," Blake growled as Sun rushed up from behind her to deliver a flying kick to Torchwick's chest. The criminal stumbled back, but quickly recovered and dodged Naruto's descending stomp, but managed to leave cracks in the crowd. "Blake!" A cry from a familiar voice made the four combatants turn to see Ruby standing on the roof of the warehouse Blake and Sun were perched on earlier. Blake's eyes grew wide in surprise and concern. "Ruby?" she asked. Sun and Naruto exchanged quick looks before they returned their attention to Torchwick. Hey, Red!" Torchwick called with a smirk on his face. "Aren't you out past your bedtime?" Ruby was distracted by something behind her, so she failed to see Torchwick raise his cane and fire off a large blast from his cane. The shot hit the young team leader, and the criminal let out a gleeful cackle. Naruto was concerned for both Ruby and, oddly enough, a little bit for Torchwick. The thief had taken a bit too much joy in making that shot. Something had snapped, and part of Naruto wanted to know what. "Ruby!" Blake cried out. Her amber eyes slit and she leapt at Torchwick with a murderous gleam in her eyes. She was going to carve the criminal's innards out with her bare claws if needed. Dirty Dirty blows like that were part of the reason Blake had left the White Fang, while Sun charged in to take back Blake up. Naruto turned towards the ocean as three more Bokkens made their way towards the shipyard. Oh, come on! Naruto groaned when the doors opened to reveal more White Fang grunts around to the teeth, armed to the teeth. They dropped down from the bullheads and started to fire at the three teens. Blake and Sun were forced to seek cover, and Naruto ignored the bullets pelting his body as he turned to a nearby container. He grabbed onto the metal doors. The doors let out an ear-piercing squeal as he ripped them off their hinges. Naruto used the container doors as makeshift shields from the bullets while he made his way over to Sun and Blake's position behind a concrete barrier. Some metal shield for the lover couple. Compliment of the house for a wonderful first night out, Naruto said as he drove the metal doors into the ground so they would not fall. Blake gave him a look of mild annoyance, but said nothing as the warped metal protected them from the hail of bullets, while Sun grinned and gave him a thumbs up in gratitude. Any other words that were about to come out of their mouths died on the tips of their tongues as Penny, the strange girl they met a few days ago, dropped down with blades hovering behind her back. She used the blades to decimate the forces of the White Fang with ease. They watched Penny plow through what had to be at least 30 grunts lined up and firing at her. The ginger-haired girl ignored their bullets and continued to utterly thrash the faunus. Their jaws dropped when the orange-haired girl used two blades to pull herself back to the warehouse. The blades embedded in the warehouse wall acted as anchors while the rest of Penny's weapons began to circle rapidly in front of her extended palms. A green orb about the size of a medical ball grew between the circling swords, and Penny pulled her fist back. Her eyes narrowed as she thrust her fists forward, and the green orb became a massive green beam at two of the bulkheads, or one was sliced down by the middle and exploded mid-air, while the other lost the wing and impacted with the ground. The last bulkhead turned to flee, but it looked like Penny wasn't in the mood to let them run. Penny threw her swords at the retreating bulkhead, where they impaled the hull with ease. Penny wrapped her hands around something, and under a closer look, Naruto saw wire. The oddball girl had met a few days prior yanked on the wires hard. The bulkhead was pulled down from the air and skid along the ground. Penny recalled her swords and smiled proudly as the bulkhead exploded in a blaze of fire. Whoa! Sun's awe was shared by Naruto and Blake as the three stared wide-eyed at the girl. She didn't even look tired. I like her. Naruto grinned as the bulkhead exploded on impact. He kicked the two metal doors down and scowled when he saw Torchwick climb onto another bulkhead that quickly flew off. There he goes! Naruto cut off as a loud bang drew his attention away from Torchwick's retreat. A shipping container flew at Penny, and the girl raised her hands to stop it. She was carried off when the container's momentum went out, though she made an impressive indent in the metal box in her effort, and the three teens were forced to duck lest the container take their heads off as it flew past. The shipping container and Penny were driven through the warehouse wall, creating a large cloud of smoke as they did, as well as a loud crash. Naruto, Sun, and Blake rushed from their container over to Penny when she climbed out of the hole and dusted herself off. Ruby dropped down from above and looked her friend over. Are you okay? Ruby asked, turning her new friend this way and that. Don't worry, Ruby. I told you before, I'm combat ready. Penny smiled wildly at the girl. She hiccuped and covered her mouth with an apologetic look in her eyes. Still, what the heck caused that? Incoming! Sun cried out as he tackled Blake to the side when she noticed another container flying at them. Ruby did the same for Penny while Naruto ran at the approaching container. He ducked his head down and brought his arms up over his face as he intercepted the flying metal box with a rough shoulder check. The container caved inwards with a loud screech when it collided with Naruto's slightly glowing body and dropped to the ground as it was immediately stopped. Okay, that smarted, Naruto grunted as he pulled himself from the caved-in shipping container. He hopped onto it and glared at the person that was approaching them from the direction that the containers had come from. It was a man that easily stood at a whopping 6.5 feet. The man was built like a freaking tanker. His bare chest easily 3 times as wide as Naruto. Muscles rippled with each step he took. His hair was a wild and long dark brown that cascaded out from his head like a lion's mane, and his eyes were crazed gold. Tattooed into his massive left pectoral was the insignia of for the White Fang. Belladonna, the man's voice called out and echoed through the night. You've been a bad kitty. Eyes turned to Blake, who had a horrified gaze looked on the newcomer. Blake, who is this guy? Ruby asked softly as she prepared crescent rolls for a fight. Likewise, Sun brought Ryu Bang and Jin Yu Bang together in the pole form, while Penny twitched when she tried to get up. Ruby pushed the girl back down with a frown. Penny, stay put. But I am combat ready. The orange-haired girl protested. She hiccuped again. You were just attacked by a shipping container. You can sit this one out, kiddo. Sun said to her before he looked at Blake. So, I take it this guy was someone you were close to in the Fang? Not even in the slightest. Blake had a sour look on her face at the thought. She drew her weapon and glared at the smirking faunus that approached them. His name is Shino, and he's the White Fang's enforcer. I'm the second lieutenant now, Shino said proudly. He lifted his knuckles up and cracked them. And guess what? Boss man doesn't want you back anymore, since you become such a human lover and betrayed him on the train. You're officially free game, and I've been dying to pound another pussy. Blake glared at him and lifted her blade. Sun and Ruby stepped up beside her with their weapons at the ready. Naruto jumped down and landed in front of the man before he could take another step. You're not hurting my friends, Naruto informed the giant. Shino's head flew back and he barked at a laugh. How adorable! You left us and found yourself some meat shields. Shino smirked at Blake and raised his hand over his shoulder. The sun balled the hand balled up and swung out. Naruto's head was snapped to the side and he was sent flying back. He made a matching hole next to the one Penny had made moments before. The smoke from Naruto's impact with the warehouse wall cleared and a brick fell to the ground. A beat of silence passed before Ruby nervously looked at a pale Blake. Oh, so what can he do? He can increase his strength to 5 times average. Blake swallowed and clenched her sheathing katana. Gumbo shot tightly, but could you blame her? She knew Shino was strong, but to see him backhand the class powerhouse through a building was a bit nerve-wracking. 10. Shino's smile rose as he vanished in a blur and reappeared in front of the 3 teens. It's 10 times now. I divert my aura through my body to increase the strength of every cell within. I run faster, jump higher, and, most importantly, hit harder. Get away from my friend! Penny called out as she sent one of her blades at the faunus enforcer's head. Shino lifted his hand up and caught the blade before it could make contact with his skin. Cute! Shino crushed the metal in his hand and let it drop to the ground. He tilted his head to the side when Sun hit him with his staff. Shino looked the monkey-tailed boy over and grinned at him. Well, you move on so fast, Belladonna. I never thought of you as a loose pussy. Don't talk about my friend that way, Ruby cried out as she swung the blunt end of her scythe at the massive faunus. Shino's head turned sideways as he had yet to move Sun's staff from his head. His grin was still present and a chuckle escaped his lips. Also eager to get killed, Shino grabbed the pole-like weapons and yanked them in, causing the two wielding the weapons to be brought close together. Shino released their weapons and grabbed them by their heads before he slammed the two into the ground with a smile on his face. The smile left his face as a cut appeared on his cheek from Blake's sword. Shino reached out and grabbed Blake by her throat before he lifted her off the ground. Blake's eyes went wide as the small nick healed. I was going to enjoy you before I killed you, but it seems like doing so would be a hazard for my health. Shino tightened his grip on Blake's throat, and her hands clenched at his fingers. Her weapons clattered on the ground as she struggled for air. I told you that you're not hurting my friends. Shino arched one of his massive eyebrows up when a glow came from the hole that he'd sent the whiskered teen through moments before. A new hole was made directly in front of him when the boy burst through the warehouse wall and his right fist barreled into Shino's cheek. The blow sent Shino flying through many shipping containers while they were made of sticks and twigs instead of steel. Freed from Shino's unbelievable tight grasp, Blake fell to the ground and Naruto landed beside her. Blake coughed harshly and gasped for air once. She pushed herself to her hands and knees with watery eyes caused by all sorts of factors. Blake looked up at Naruto gratefully and few differences to his appearance. A thin, faint red line of blood poured from his right corner of his mouth to the end of his jaw, but that was the only sign that Naruto had taken any damage. Well, the blood was all she could make out due to the contrast the blood had with his defiantly glowing golden skin. It wasn't a light hue like before, and instead was like a full-blown beacon of golden light. Naruto's eyes, now a blind gold instead of a deep blue, met her amber orbs. Are you alright, Belle? Blake coughed once more and nodded with while she rubbed her throat. Good. Naruto gave her a small smile. It would have made her blush if not for the fact Blake was still trying to breathe properly. That and the small trail of blood was a bit off-putting. Naruto looked back to where she launched. Shino and his smile fell while his eyes flashed. Keep the others back. It's been a while since I've fought someone who could make me bleed. Before Blake could ask what he meant, Naruto pushed down on one foot and shot forward. The ground he drove his feet into had crumbled and formed a small crater. Blake stared at it for a moment and with her hand still around her neck. What the heck what kind of semblance did that? A moment later, Haku appeared beside her in one of his mirrors. He helped Ruby sit up while Kurama and Sasuke dropped down from the roof of the warehouse. Sasuke assisted Sun and Kurama and went over to pick up Penny. Wow, kid, what got you so stiff? Kurama asked as he picked the girl up. Penny tilted her head. I believe that I am running at 63% efficiency after Ruby tackled me to the ground. Uh-huh, Kurama mumbled before he carried her over to the rest of the others. Ruby has a small concussion and Sun managed to flare his aura before he hit the ground. Haku said as he looked up from where he knelt at Blake's side to check her throat. He smiled at the cat fawners. You certainly didn't want to make not worrying about you easy, did you? Blake looked down in slight shame. The injuries her friend suffered all could have been avoided if she hadn't run away like that. She looked up when Sun put a hand on her shoulder and gave her a grin. He was joking, Blake. Sun chuckled. He looked towards the direction that Naruto had run off. Well, will the little dude be alright? Like he said, it's been a while since he's fought someone that could make him bleed when he was using the well of fire. Sasuke shook his head. Kakashi would have him doing D ranks for months. Oh yeah, Kurama agreed with a nod. What are you talking about? Blake asked with a hoarse voice. What's a well of fire? How did you know that you were here? I felt a surge of aura over this way. Kurama cutting quickly while he checked Penny's aura. He gave the ginger girl a strange look and hummed thoughtfully. You're a strange girl, kid. Is that bad? Penny asked. No, just different. Natural semblance, Haku said as he reached into his stash and pulled out a small canteen. Here, drink some water. It will help soothe the soreness in your throat. Blake took a drink and then looked over towards the two fighting beings. What does the semblance have to do with anything? Naruto's semblance doubles, dubbed the Will of Fire, is powered by Naruto's will. His aura reserves are nearly as endless as my own, Kurama said. We have abnormally large reserves, and as such, our semblances are very unique. My sensory is nearly unmatched, and transfer makes me a deadly opponent, since I can drain someone's reserves to absolutely nothing. Naruto's Will of Fire, however, well, I'd rather have to fight myself than fight him. You got in a lucky shot, Shino snarled as he caught Naruto's punch in his hand. He pulled the boy in and drilled his knee into Naruto's gut. The whiskered teen gasped and stumbled back, his defense down as he tried to regain air. Naruto took a punch to the head that sent him tumbling along the ground before he started to rise. He was currently fighting with 8 times his normal strength and durability, but Shino's dense cells were hard to keep damaged. Every counter that the Funnies got in gave him time to heal from a blow Naruto had dealt. At least now Naruto knew why his classmates felt so annoyed or irritated when they sparred with him. Well, that combined with the pranks he pulled on them usually caused them irritation anyway. This is pointless, boy. You got in one good shot, but you can't win, Shino said as he glared at the whiskered brat that had dared to defy him. The lion-like Fauna spread his arms. I am the perfect warrior. You cannot defeat me. Maybe not, but I won't stop until I know my friends are safe. Naruto grinned out as he held his cracked, if not broken, ribs and glared at Shino's golden eyes with his own. He gritted his teeth and let out a yell as he charged at the Faunus with his hand brought back. Shino shook his head and delivered a barrage of blows to the blonde, finished with a roundhouse kick that sent Naruto soaring through a shipping container. Shino lowered his leg and walked over to the boy as he started to get up. With a snarl, Shino lifted a foot up and slammed it down into Naruto's back. I will kill you, boy. It is in your best interest to stay down, Shino warned the young teen. I will make it quick and painless if you do. Naruto grit his teeth and pushed himself up despite the weight on his back. Shino smirked and punted Naruto on his side, knocking him into a container. As Naruto stumbled off, Shino appeared before him and grabbed the boy by his neck. I am only here for the belladonna, and as far as we know, she isn't even on your team. Why do you fight so hard for a criminal that isn't on your team? Shino asked out of genuine curiosity. Because she's my friend. Naruto grinned out as he glared through one eye at the Faunus. His eyes squeezed shut as Shino lifted him up and drove him head first into the ground. Then you're a fool, Shino exclaimed as he grabbed the boy by his ankles and whipped him over at another container. The metal creaked in protest as it folded inwards from Naruto being thrown into it. Shino smirked again. I smirked and figured that was enough, turned to walk back over to his intended target. The sound of metal creaked accompanied the groan of a young man made Shino stop and look back to see Naruto push himself from the container and land on the ground. The whiskered blonde rose from the ground shakingly and limped on the ground. The whiskered blonde rose from the ground shakingly and limped towards Shino with a determined glint in his golden eyes. His hair started to flicker and blow in a non-existent wind as it started to glow with aura. Leave, my friends, alone, Naruto grunted out as he limped towards the Faunus. You stupid boy. I was willing to let you live, but you leave me no choice. Shino shook his head as he walked back towards Naruto and flicked his fingers out, allowing claws to extend over his fingernails. He stood in front of Naruto, grinned and straightened his hand before he pulled it back. Now do something useful and die so I can go kill those other brats. The clawed hand was thrust forward like a missile. Naruto's left hand shot up and caught Shino's wrist in a vice-like grip. The whiskered blonde hair burned with aura, and his eyes fell open. The ocular organs were a solid gold that glared at the shocked Shino's cat-like eyes. Naruto's hand tightened, and Shino's wrist snapped. Shino roared with pain and threw a punch with his other hand. Naruto caught the attack and squeezed. A sickening crunch filled the air as he broke the Faunus' hand. Shino dropped to his knees as he let out another pain-filled bellow. Naruto released the useless hands and stepped back while Shino stuttered with the anger and pain. You little brat! I will kill you! Shino snarled, his eyes slitted as he got back to his feet. His hand slowly flexed, and his eyes winced as he tried to form a fist. Naruto avoided the overhead chop and drove his elbow into Shino's side. Ribs cracked and Shino let out another roar of pain. Naruto ignored the Faunus' pain as he dropped to a knee and embedded his fist into Shino's gut. The golden husband in training felt no sympathy or pity for the one that threatened and harmed his friends. All he felt was a vindication in his actions and a need to be as ruthless as possible. This was the point Naruto needed to drive home here and now. The whiskered blonde pulled his fist back, had his beefcake of an opponent be doubled over. Naruto dropped to his back, and his fist flew up to strike the Faunus hard in the chin. Shino's head snapped back, and a tooth flew out of his mouth. Shino's right leg planted itself firmly in the ground so that he wouldn't go flying. The Faunus looked down just in time to see Naruto spin from his back into a low sweep that would have knocked him off of his feet. Shino jumped up over the sweep kick and smirked. The smirk fell into a look of shock when Naruto quickly twisted around on his hands and delivered a powerful mule kick that sent Shino into the air like a rocket. Naruto twisted back to his feet and then jumped off the Faunus. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he brought his right fist down. Up! Naruto's right fist struck Shino's stomach, launching the Faunus into the clouds. Up! The left fist replaced the right, and Shino's doubled up over and coughed the blood down. A punch to the back of the head made Shino spin in the air and start to descend down. Another downward punch sent Shino backwards towards the veil. Naruto descended after him and brought his left fist back. Left, Shino's head turned to the left as a punch struck him in the cheek. Right, Shino's head turned right and a canine flew out of his mouth. Left, three left were more forcibly removed. Three teeth were forcibly removed as they neared the ground. Right, Naruto dislocated the faunus' jaw. Backhand, and Shino started to spin as he descended towards the ground. And hammer shot. Feet before they hit the ground, Naruto's hands entwined over his head and were swung down. Shino's body collided with the cement with a loud bang, and smoke shot up in a cloud. When it cleared, Shino was in the center of a crater that was 10 feet deep, his body stuck in the ground, and his eyes barely open as he struggled to remain conscious. Naruto stood over him, his hair flickered like a flame, and his eyes narrowed as he glared down at the Faunus extremists. "It's assholes like you that give Faunuses a bad name," he said to the barely conscious Faunus. "I don't know if you'll stay in prison long, or if you'll still be here by the police by the time the police arrive. But when you see your bosses again, tell them that you lost to a human. Tell them that you failed to kill a teenager. Tell them that I'm not afraid of them and I will be waiting for them to try something stupid. Tell them that my name is Naruto Uzumaki, and if they want to hurt any of my friends, they have to go through me first. And believe me, pal, if they get through me, they're not going to make it to a hospital. That's a promise." Naruto left Shino in the crater with a scowl on his face. He stopped on the edge and turned back to the unconscious Faunus. "You should count yourself lucky that I need to send a message and that I'm not a criminal like you. If I were, your head would be the message, and I would be mailed and it would be mailed in a box." Naruto returned to his friend's side of the shipyard. Once his semblance had dropped back to the base settings, he realized that bones ached and his muscles protested any movement, but he continued to stand well until after the Veil police had arrived. Many, if not all, the White Fang grunts were arrested and, as Naruto thought, Shino got away. Penny had vanished among the confusion which worried Ruby until Kurama had reassured her that the girl was fine. "Blake," the group looked up as Yang and Weiss walked up to them. Yang had a smile on her face at seeing her partner again. That smile fell as she realized Ruby had several bandages around her head, and Naruto's clothes looked like they'd gone through a meat grinder. Blake and Sun also looked a bit scuffed up, but not as badly as the other two. Yang rushed over to her sister first and began to examine her like a mother hen. Ruby managed to get past her sister and stood between Blake and Weiss. Blake explained everything, and she's really sorry that she lied. And Ruby's rambling was silenced by her partner's raised hand as she walked past her to Blake and looked at her cat ears. Weiss's eyes dropped down to meet Blake's. "Do you know how long we've been looking for you?" Weiss's voice was cold as she spoke. Blake looked down and rubbed her arms as Weiss continued. 12 hours. 12 hours. And do you know what I did in those 12 hours? I thought long and hard about what you told me, about what you told us, and you know what I realized? Weiss, I don't care. Blake looked at the Schnee Harris in mild shock. Weiss crossed her arms. "You say you were part of the White Fang, that you're fondness? Fine, whatever. That's not who you are now. You're part of Team Ruby, and I realized I was more hurt that you didn't trust us with the secret than I was over the secret itself." "Weiss, about the White Fang, Blake tried again. Weiss raised her hand. "I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I just want you to know, next time something like this comes up, I hope you trust us to help you." Weiss took a moment to direct her glare at Sun. "And not some no-good rapscallion of a thief." Sun chuckled weakly before he pointed at Sun. "He helped. Oi, dude," Naruto squawked in outrage. "He just fought a literal beefcake and probably broke at least 5 or 6 bones. He was so going to be sore tonight. Speaking of which," Yang looked at Naruto with her hands on her hips. "What the hell happened to you, Whisker Boy?" No more cold shoulder. Cool." Naruto grinned weakly when she chuckled at his pun. "Met a guy who could make me sore in all the wrong ways." "You poor baby. Do you need a kiss to make it better?" Yang asked with a small smile. I wouldn't be opposed to it. Naruto chuckled at his joke and then winced in mild pain. His eyes shot open wide as a pair of lips pressed against his. Ruby and Weiss's jaws dropped while Blake's eyebrows quirked upwards. Sun grinned and gave Naruto a thumbs up of approval as the whiskered blonde was released from the kiss. That was for helping my sister and my partner, Yang said as she traced one of Naruto's whisker marks before she turned to her teammates with a smile. Let's go back to Beacon and get some shut-eye. We got class in the morning. The rest of Team Ruby nodded in agreement and left, leaving Naruto stunned and staring off into the distance. Sun laughed as he waved his hands in front of his friend's face, not getting a reaction. Called it. Haku smirked and held his hand out. Kurama scowled and Sasuke grimaced as they pulled some lien and slapped it into the androgynous boy's hands. I was so sure he'd focus on Nikos, Kurama grumbled. What with his red hair fetish and all? We're doomed if they procreate, Sasuke sighed. Naruto just blinked. What just happened? End of chapter 8.